Good day. My name is Carol McCoy. Today is May 14th, 2021. Steve Cobb and I are at the Nashville Bar Association offices at 150 4th Avenue North, Suite 1050, Nashville, Tennessee. The interview of Steve Cobb is being conducted for the Legal History Project of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Carol.
In order to start off this interview, I'd like you to introduce yourself formally and tell me the date and place of your birth.
My name is Steve Cobb. I was born in Moline, Illinois on January 27, 1944.
Would you please tell me a little bit about your birth family, your paternal grandparents, maternal grandparents, your father, where he was born, his name, what he did, whether he was involved in any politics or community events, and the same thing for your mother?
Well, my mother was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
When?
In 1906. Got the exact date. Yeah, 1906. My father, I'm not sure. When this came up, I started looking into it. I think in Chicago. I mean, he certainly comes from that area.
What was his name?
Archibald William.
Cobb?
Cobb. Oh, yes. Yeah, but the Archibald is an interesting thing because my grandfather, on my father's side, was born in London, England. And we were definitely, the whole family is British. And so the grandfather also had kind of a tilt towards the British, and it was interesting. And
What was your grandfather's name?
Archibald William.
But not Cobb?
Yeah.
And what was your grandmother's name on the paternal side? What was your grandmother's name?
I don't know.
Do you know your maternal grandparents?
Yes. Yes. William, my grandfather on my mother's side was, I'm trying to think about it. The interesting thing was when you have what I've got, you get a little pressure, and all of a sudden everything blanks out.
That's
all
right.
You stop, you go someplace else, and it comes back.
Well, we'll come back.
All right.
Tell me about your dad and what he did. When was your dad born?
1903.
And where?
Well, that's what I was talking about. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, we always went to Chicago to
So
see
you
him.
think it was Chicago?
I think it was Chicago, but it was certainly either Chicago or upper middle part of Illinois.
Okay. And what did he do while you were a little kid?
He worked for Standard Register, which is still in business, for a while, and then became office manager of Iowa Mutual Insurance Company in DeWitt, Iowa, and basically worked there till his death.
Was he involved at all in the community besides just working?
Yeah, some. Nothing particularly spectacular. There was only 3,500 people in the whole community, so there wasn't that much to do, to be honest.
Did your mother work?
After my mother and father realized that he had cancer and it wasn't going to go that well, she made a major effort to get her teaching certificate back, and she started working just a little bit before he died.
How old was he? Do you remember how old he was when he died?
56, I believe.
That's pretty young.
Yeah, I know.
And how many children did your parents have?
2. No, 3. Me, my brother, and my sister.
Are you the oldest?
I am the oldest, yes.
And your brother lives where?
He lives in western Colorado, actually in Utah. It's one of those things, I'll think of it later. But anyway, he lives in a town directly across the border from Las Vegas area. I mean, it's a good 2-hour drive, but it's right there. There's nothing else
Between it.
Yeah.
And he has 2 children? Or
He has the same number as my mother.
3?
3. Absolutely. It's done. Not often anymore.
Now, are you the first, the oldest in the family?
I'm the oldest, yes.
And then your brother, his name is?
Bill.
Bill.
William Bates Cobb.
And then you have a sister,
Yes.
Jody?
Yep.
And where does she live?
She lives now and has for about 10 or 15 years in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She is a full professor of musicology at the University of Alabama.
I think your wife Nancy told me that your sister at one time lived in Germany.
For 30 years.
That's a long time.
She is totally native speaker fluent in German.
And what was she doing there?
Living with her husband, the German,
And what's his name?
Peter Bierman.
And are they now together and
Yeah,
they have children?
yeah.
All right. And
Don't ask me to tell me
when
they
no,
were
no.
born.
What I wanted to do is ask you about where you grew up. It sounds as though,
That I can tell you. That I can tell you.
all right.
The town was DeWitt. I was born in Moline, Illinois, which is on the river, and then we moved over into Rock Island for a couple of, and basically for about 6 years. We were in the Quad City area, is what it's called. And then when my dad took the job at Iowa Mutual, we moved 20 miles north to DeWitt, Iowa, which is where the company has its headquarters.
And did your parents get involved with the church or?
Oh yes, my mother was very devout without the nastiness that sometimes accompanies that. I shouldn't be saying it that way, I guess, but she was not a hater, or she didn't.
She was very tolerant.
Tolerant, yeah, that's a good word.
And you all went to church with her. Do you
Yeah.
remember the church or?
Sure. DeWitt Methodist, United Methodist Church, and my dad went too. We later found out, late in life, that he had been raised as a Catholic. And my mother, one thing she could be a little bit of a bigot on, and that was Catholics. She was definitely a Protestant. See, that, but she also was very convincing, and so my dad went to Methodist church my entire life.
Well, tell me a little bit of what you would do for fun as a young person.
That's interesting. An interesting question, because I'm not sure. The first thing you want to say is, well, I'm not sure we had that much fun in DeWitt, Iowa, 3,500 people. And the more I think about it, that's probably not a bad answer. Outside, gardening, working, running, playing baseball, all the kinds of things that kids do.
Do you remember any special hobbies that you might have had?
I was kind of a science bug.
Oh.
And, I was interested in playing with gunpowder and all sorts of fun types of
Experiments.
chemistry.
What do you remember about the schools that you went to? You went to grade school there and high school in DeWitt?
Went to grade school for the first, couple of years when we were still living in the Quad City area. And then there's only one school. I mean, there's one of each in DeWitt. You didn't have any choice. If you wanted to go to school, you went to school there. And, DeWitt Community High School was the final name. We consolidated when I was going into my senior year, and went from having a total in the graduating class of 32 to, I think we went all the way up to 85 or something like that.
So you had a really close student body, and you probably knew a lot of people
Knew them all.
and grew up with them.
I grew up with them.
Do
Yeah.
you stay in touch with any of them?
No.
They all went their separate ways?
Yeah, a lot of them stayed around there, and that's, it was hard to keep up when you're down here, and they're staying 600 miles away in DeWitt, Iowa. So,
When you got to high school, did you participate in any sports?
yeah, all the male children participated in sports. And I didn't participate very skillfully, I must confess. But yes, I definitely did. I even played football one year. Big mistake.
Big mistake. What was your favorite sport?
Favorite sport? Well, putting everything together, I'd say probably track and field.
And do you have any memories of your favorite teachers that might have helped shape the person you became?
The only one whose name I really remember, well, there's some others too. Larry Cederroth treated us like adults, and it was, and he was very supportive of everything I did. He was certainly memorable.
What did he teach?
Economics,
Okay.
which is unusual. I don't know how to describe the situation. It may not have been pure economics, but it was close, and it was certainly very well done. And then you had others, Miss Bushlow, and Ms. this and Ms. that, and Cederoth was memorable, as you can tell. I'm remembering his name, but I'm not sure how much. Miss Flossie Schottke, a dear friend of my mother, was the typing teacher, and she taught me typing in the summer one year, and that was very memorable.
And that was pretty unusual for boys to start taking typing at that time period.
Well, my mother was unusual.
Oh.
You need to do this, you ought to do it.
So what did you do during the summers when you were in high school?
So, at a certain age I had paper route that took up some time. Others, parts of the year would be, the band,
Oh, what did you play?
trombone.
Can you still remember how to play the trombone?
Yes, but my lip is shut. I've got the trombone that I played back then.
Did you have any summer jobs other than your paper route? Did you?
Yep.
What kind of summer jobs did you have?
Worked in a Walker store, which was at the time, originally, you could buy everything in it. It was kind of like something out in the countryside. I mean, we had the grocery shopping, but we also had clothes.
Department store type? But
Yeah.
but kind of like a Walmart before there was a Walmart?
Yes.
Huh. And what did you do?
Whatever they told me to start with. But I helped stock the shelves, and I actually helped sell to people when they came in and nobody else was around. Everything that you would expect.
Did you do that more than one summer?
Yes. A couple of years, at least a couple of years.
Well, as you got closer to graduating, how did you start looking at colleges, and why did you decide to go to college?
Well, I decided to go to college because I'd always, from the day I was born, knew I was going to go to college.
Both your parents had been?
My mother, yes. My father, no. He graduated from high school, and that was all the further he got. Remember, this is 120 years ago. I say this is 120 years ago that we're talking about my dad being born.
Right.
And there were an awful lot of people who didn't go to college.
Right. So you thought from the time you were born you were going to go to college?
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I'd say my mother's,
Promoting it?
Yeah, creating the myth, the mythology that there's nothing else to
The
that you do.
expectation.
The expectation is better. Yeah, that's a good word.
And so, what were you interested in studying, and what colleges did you look at?
I looked at one college and made an application for that college plus one other college as a fallback,
And what college was that?
Harvard.
That is a very good school to go to.
Yes, yes. If they let you in, it works pretty well.
Did they let you in?
They did.
Did you get a scholarship?
I did.
And had you ever been to Boston?
No.
Did you know what Harvard was going to be like?
Yes and no. In terms of everything, no, obviously. But, yeah, I had some ideas. I wasn't totally stupid.
What was it like?
It was, Harvard was a very class-driven society. You know, you had people who were of average means, and Harvard always got them in, made them able. If they were good enough and Harvard wanted them, you could get it. Well, I had a scholarship my first couple of years, and I had a National Merit Scholarship to go with it, so I was okay. And then they jacked the tuition up.
Do you remember how much the tuition was when you first started?
Well, I remember $1,500 was the amount that we were dealing with, the extra amount, but I think the whole tuition was much more than that.
Okay. And then
I don't know. My mother took care of that.
and then they raised the tuition while you were going to school?
Yep.
And what did you have to do?
I had to be nice and pass my courses and all that. With the notice that they were going to raise the tuition, they sent a notice that they were raising my scholarship as well.
Thank goodness.
Nice.
Yes. And what did you study?
I ended up majoring in sociology and that sort of thing, social relations they called it at Harvard then.
What drew you to that particular major?
Well, I ran out of time. In order to get out of Harvard, get the degree, one of the things you had to do is have a major with at least 6 or 8, I've forgotten, class hours in that. And I was facing my last summer or two, and I had to get another. If I was going to graduate on time, I had to get another class or two, and I had a bunch of them because they were the one I was most interested in at the time. So I basically took that extra course and got the degree that way. My real interest at Harvard, frankly, was very strange. It was elementary foreign languages. I'm joking, but I'm not joking, because I had almost as many, until that last burst, I had as many classes of foreign language as I had of sociology. And they were all elementary, because they didn't even offer a foreign language in my school in Iowa.
So when you were first exposed to one of those classes, what did you discover about them?
It was awfully, awfully hard, and there were awfully smart, quick people who'd already had plenty of foreign language before they got into even the elementary course.
Which foreign languages did you take?
The first one was French, and we were required to either test out or take a foreign language. And so I said, I can remember to this day sitting in a chair like this, looking at the dean, who I happen to have a dean for advisor, and said, "What do you want to do with a foreign language?" And I said, "Well, I guess French is, French was one of the first in the catalog." I said, "I guess French would be okay." I mean, what did I know, So I took French, and I almost flunked it.
This is childhood French?
I'm sorry?
Childhood French or French basic French?
I'm starting off to learn the language. It's not just basic.
Okay.
They go a whole lot further than that, I guarantee you. And I did real poorly in it because I didn't know. I tried to cram at the end in one language course. You cannot do that.
No, you can't.
No matter how bright you are. But I passed, and that was probably the worst thing that happened. I passed that course. French C was it called. And the next year I came back and I had my sophomore slump, which everybody has. And I flunked enough so that I basically had to take some more class. And so here I was, I had flunked French. By the way, my brother Bill also flunked French at Harvard.
He followed you the next year?
A couple years.
Okay.
A couple years.
He kept the family tradition going.
Exactly, which I thought was very, very nice of him. But anyway, so I got in the class, and it was more of the same thing, too hard. Everything was conducted in French from the beginning. They explained to me how it was going to work, and the whole class. And from there on in, he lectured in French. First year. Second year, they were starting the same thing, and so I switched over. They had a reading course that people who were dummies like me, who had no foreign language, could pass the language requirement. And I took that class and flunked it. Absolutely just got an E, which is what Harvard calls an F. And then I went to see my dean. I had another dean. And talk my way into the second course, second half of the course, first semester, second semester. The first semester I flunked. Talked my way into the second semester and got an A.
How did that happen?
That's an interesting question. Suffice it to say, I knew that it was going well halfway through it. And they reduced the impact. They weren't so concentrating on grammar and all that sort of stuff. They were reading literature and that kind of stuff. But, apparently, I later heard, I'm not sure how I heard it, but I heard that the day that they got all the teachers together in the classroom to decide what they're going to do with everybody, how it's going, they had a big fight over me. How could I go at Harvard, of all places, from F to A? And she says, take a look at his stuff. It's great,
Something clicked. Something clicked for you.
Yes, clicked for me. And then I got interested in it, and I had to take an extra course, remember?
Correct.
I flunked one, so I had to take an extra one. I decided to take Italian. So I took Italian one summer, and then I have one calendar year as Italian.
And I will ask, did you pass?
I passed B+ or something like that.
Did you like Italian?
C.
See.
A.
Did you have an opportunity to take any other foreign languages at that time?
Well, I tried. I started off in German my senior year, and realized I had to get out of that German class and take that sociology class I needed to graduate. Everything's tied together.
All right, so now you're going to have a major in sociology. You're about to graduate from Harvard, which is a great accomplishment. What were your plans after that?
I was getting back in the sort of a more normal course. I applied for a PhD program in sociology at Vanderbilt.
Is that the only school you applied to?
I don't remember.
I just asked because you only applied to one school, which many people would have said,
You're crazy.
That's exactly right. And you got in, and so you applied to Vanderbilt for a PhD program, and
I got in.
you got in.
And a scholarship.
And another scholarship. And what was your focus at the PhD level?
Graduating.
What was your paper in, if you remember, or your
Oh,
thesis?
yes. It was a relationship between congressional voting and where the money, lobbying, where the lobbying money is. You know, if one particular member of the U.S. Senate or House, I actually got the House as well, votes more heavily than other people similarly situated, then you ask why, and you take a look. If the reason, if you can't say the reason, that's wrong, but if the person,
correlation?
what you're talking about is a correlation between how much
Interest money
yeah,
and how the person voted.
exactly.
And you studied that?
Yep. I went to the Pentagon. Nancy and I went to the Pentagon, and I talked them into giving me the figures on the House districts. Nobody else had those.
Nobody had done that before?
Nobody had done that before. But the Senate, yes, because that's published.
But at the
Senate,
time, the
it's
House wasn't.
The House was not, exactly.
And what led you to pick that as your topic? Why were you interested in politics?
This was back in the late 60s,
And
Vietnam War.
had you been active in any of the...
I hadn't yet. Remember, again, I graduated in 66, so it was just getting cranked up then.
Graduated from Harvard in 66.
Yes.
So all of the civil rights movements were still in their infancy. It had several tragic things happen in the early 60s
Yeah.
with JFK and Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy.
Well,
But he was a little bit later.
That was, both of those are
Yeah.
later in my career.
But that's when civil rights started to become in the paper quite a bit, and the Vietnam War was escalating.
Right.
So you're about to graduate in 66. You come to Vanderbilt, not a hotbed of political activity, and you pick the correlation between lobbyists or moneyed interests and voting records in the
Right.
House.
Right.
And why did you do that?
First of all, I was interested in it. Second of all, it was a topic that was beginning to be noticed. I ended up, I think I can say one of the top scholars in that general area. I remember having, friendly fights with a professor at Yale University and then several major schools. I became a major player in that particular area.
Did you speak at these other schools?
I spoke quite a number of times and published
Quite a bit.
a number of articles and book chapters. No, it was a real career. I mean, you think of me as a lawyer, and I certainly was a lawyer. Am a lawyer, I guess, in one sense. But I was also a professor.
And you get your PhD, you
Yeah.
published, you're engaging in the educational environment. Did you go on to teach?
Yep,
Where did you teach?
TSU.
And what fields, what classes did you teach?
Different. About the time that I was graduating, Nixon had taken over and was cutting back scholarships. So I had tremendous pressure to find something that would work. And I went to TSU to see if I could do a little part-time teaching to get some money into the family. And he said, no, we're not going to do part-time, but if you want a full-time job, we can start you in December. Full-time job. But it was not in what I told you my topic was. It was, they wanted me to be the head of the Department of Criminal Justice.
Now, I want to just catch up a little bit because you talked about your family and you
Yes.
mentioned Nancy.
Yes.
Just to bring us full circle, Tell me how you met Nancy and how you got together.
We met when I was heading up the campaign for Gene McCarthy,
In 68?
68.
Was it in,
In our
Boston?
headquarters. No, here.
oh, in Nashville?
Yeah. I was the chairman of the committee for McCarthy in Tennessee.
For president.
Yes.
And Nancy was a volunteer?
Yep.
Now, what did you all have in common?
McCarthy
And politics.
and politics.
Was this the first time you'd ever volunteered for a political campaign?
That's another question. I'm not sure I know. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but it was the first time there had been a war started in my lifetime.
This was a major commitment that you had heading up the campaign for McCarthy for president.
By the time I got out of that first year, or second, maybe third year of grad school, it became, from the beginning it wasn't that much. It was going to be nice to take it easy. And my professors, bless their hearts, were very tolerant of this, but as it got more and more engaged, I actually had to postpone my doctoral exams because I was doing politics full time.
Tell me what you learned about politics in that campaign. Did you meet Eugene McCarthy?
Oh, yeah.
And what was your impression of him?
Impressive. I didn't think he floated over the city, but he was impressive.
And certainly anti-war.
Anti-war and had the guts to do it. And that was the best.
He was a senator from
Minnesota or
Minnesota.
Michigan? No, Minnesota, I think.
Minnesota. But he didn't win.
No, I noticed.
And I asked you about the politics. This is your first foray into politics. What did you take away from that experience?
Strong interest in politics beyond just the anti-war.
What had you learned about how politics works in that experience?
To some degree. Actually, probably the majority of what you need to know. It's just a matter of doing it, getting your feet wet, and not letting people discourage you.
And what were some of those things that, when you say you get your feet wet, what was a new experience for you? Did you do telephone banks? Did you go out and...
No, we didn't have the money for telephone banks. We did, that was back when you couldn't fiddle with the telephone, but we fiddled with our telephone, and so we did a lot of telephone work. But the major thing was just getting people out, contacting people as much as possible. And, that was the way we did it back then. Still the way people do a lot of it.
Did you plan events?
We planned events, yeah.
And who would speak on behalf of his candidacy?
We didn't have, I don't know, too many large, we were in Tennessee. Nobody expected, none of the candidates expected, Republican, Democrat, they all wrote us off. We were, where did this Cobb guy come from? So we didn't have him coming through town every 6 weeks or every 4 weeks. So I think we had him come through once, maybe twice.
And what'd you do on the fundraising side?
We didn't really do much fundraising.
So it was,
here
it's a grassroots campaign.
I'm a 22-year-old kid who's
Working on his PhD.
the PhD, in social sciences. It's not exactly the kind of thing that people want to write big checks for. Well, the most interesting and the nicest fundraising effort was our headquarters. Bill Martin, who was a wealthy local businessman, crazy as a loon, but a wealthy local businessman, gave us a whole building to use. We had dances and we had all sorts of things in those buildings, and that's where we had all our staff offices, thanks to him.
So you delayed your thesis in order to wrap up the campaign.
Not the thesis exactly.
Oh.
The exam. They with the PhD you have a sort of a here's pass or fail kind of exam, and if they let you get to the exam, usually you're in pretty good shape. But in my case, it was always iffy.
Well, at some point, and what was the year, if you remember, that you finally finished your PhD?
71.
And then you went to
Took me 5 years, which is not bad.
No, not bad at all. Then you went to TSU, but you'd already had these interchanges with a lot of other schools about your study. And did you take them up on their criminal justice offer?
I ended up doing that. So I spent almost 5 years, 4.5 years, as chairman of the Department of Criminal Justice at
When you
TSU.
started, what did you know about criminal justice?
I know that I didn't know a whole lot, and that I'd have to rely on other people for the substance. I could do the organizing work and, be a department chair, department head, they call it.
And who did you rely on?
Well, at first I relied on myself, but then we hired some extra people, and TSU, it became one of the largest departments at TSU because there were a lot of scholarships, and the kids needed money to get through. And so we had more people who looked like they were going to go become prison guards and all that kind of stuff than you could believe possible. I mean, we had 300,
And did you enjoy being the department head for criminal justice?
Well, by comparison to some other things, yes. But it was not exactly thrilling.
Did you learn very much about criminal justice during that time?
Yeah.
And how did that play into your interest in politics that had just
It played
emerged?
more into my interest in the law.
Okay.
That's how I got to law school and all the rest. It's part of the reason I got to law school and all the rest, because I was reading these things that came through, books, this, and I was, I felt kind of funny, that I felt like I should be a lawyer, even though I already had a PhD.
Right.
So,
Did you know any lawyers at the time?
Oh yeah, because I've been in politics, remember?
That was after you were 22 years old.
Yeah.
But growing up, did you know any?
Not really. One guy.
And being the chair of the department piqued your interest, so you began to get interested.
It really contributed to that. I wouldn't say it was the only thing that piqued my interest, but I was sitting there, I was almost like an attorney in my office there. We were talking about legal topics and all that, all the rest.
Correct.
So it just seemed like a natural course.
And following that course, what did you do?
To follow that course, basically, there's some other things about the legislature and all that kind of stuff that I need to put in, but the lawyer part, the legal part, I applied once again, one place. Yeah. I have been very fortunate, shall we say. The guys have treated me very fairly.
You have very good applications. So you applied to?
Vanderbilt.
Now.
And I told them this was the only place I was applying to, and they said that's really stupid. I said, well, I have no choice. I was going to run for the legislature.
And that's what I want to talk to you about. While you are teaching, at what point did you decide that you would be a candidate for political office?
Well, the first thing, you asked me earlier what are the things I learned about politics and all that, and I said I learned that I had a very strong interest in this, and that was really the big thing. I decided to leave TSU and go to law school, and I almost didn't get in. I was admitted.
Provisionally?
No, I was admitted on Monday after everything started on Friday before.
Somebody didn't show up.
That's possible. That's possible. But Sissy Daughtry, I think, probably bailed me out. I knew her through politics, and Larry and others. And I heard later she told me the story about they had a committee argument again about whether we should let Cobb in. And thank goodness they let me in.
They did. With your PhD, and tell me about...
I was not the only PhD in my class, by the way.
Who else?
There was one or two others. One of them was a music major PhD from the University of Iowa, as I recall.
So you enter law school, and what was your interest in political office?
Well, you could ask it just the reverse. You said, what was your interest in law versus the other? It was perfect. I mean, there was much too much to do, and it really was a strain and a struggle.
Did you run for office the same year you started law school?
I got elected my first year of law school.
So the year that you started was 78?
No.
70.
Let's see. Now you ask me something that puts that pressure.
Well, let's not go to pressure. Let's just say the year that you applied for law school and you were wondering if you were going to get in, you were running for office.
Yes.
And the election comes up, and is it an August election or a November election?
Well, first of all, it was the August election. You had to get through the primary back then.
And you won the primary?
No, I lost the primary the first time.
Okay. And and then you started law school?
No.
Oh, were you still at TSU?
Yes.
So you had been at TSU when you ran the first time. 2 years later, you run again.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I could justify running was that TSU, I wasn't sure the university system would tolerate somebody running for office. I'd be running to become a legislator determining the budget of TSU. So that was a little bit of an interesting thing.
A little bit of a conflict.
Potentially, yeah.
And do you remember who did win that race?
Yeah. Let's see. The person who was in the office beforehand, his wife ran. Bradley, Dr. Bradley. That district is a funny district. 3 out of the last 4 people who represented that area all had PhDs. That was part of what you had to do. No, I'm trying to think. I think 73, I got out. What happened that's most memorable was walking into, we had the class in the rooms, one of the large rooms over at the law school, and I came in with everybody else. We'd all gotten to know each other in the 6 or 8 weeks that we'd been studying under immense pressure, and I was just one of the other students. I came in, and the dean said, "Stand up, Mr. Cobb. Congratulations," because I had just been elected to the I entered law school And then several weeks later, I was elected to the legislature.
You start in September, and then in November, like the second Tuesday in November or the second Thursday, that's when you are elected to the state legislature.
Exactly, in my
So-
first year of law school.
So you're going to law school full-time, and you're supposed to be in the legislature starting in January.
Right.
And what did you know about being an elected official at that point?
Well, the thing you said earlier about what did you learn in politics, I mean, you learn how to do it. You learn what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, running a campaign is totally different than being a policymaker.
Yes.
Do they send you to elected official school so that you can understand what
We
you're...
didn't have such things back then.
So you just show up and get sworn in.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you meet with your Democratic caucus or your Republican caucus, and you do the pro forma choosing who's going to be the speaker and all the other. There's plenty to do.
Plenty to do. So how do you juggle plenty to do with your first year of law school and plenty to do with the...
There were moments I asked myself that question. I'll let you know when I come up with a good answer.
Well, did you have any problems with law school?
No, it was perfect for me. I mean, too much work, much too much work, but the subject was of real interest. The legal system, the law. I knew the professors from my political. I had a funny sort of situation. I was a student and all that, but I was also a somewhat prominent member of the community.
Correct.
Which gave me an interesting relationship.
Perspective, right.
Perspective, yeah.
And you were not necessarily a peer with your professors, but you had been a professor. You did have a PhD. Also, you had credentials before you showed up.
Yes.
And most people are getting their credential with the JD or their law degree.
I just told people I was going to stay in school as long as I could.
So when you finished law school, you had been elected twice? Once in your first year and once in your third year?
No, I'm at 74, I think is when I finished law school.
Okay.
No, I went to TSU the winter of 71. So 71, 72, 73, 74, 70, yeah, no, I was right, that's right. 74 was when I finished up, 74, 75 period.
And you were still a state representative.
Yeah.
So when you finished law school, what was your plan?
I'm not sure I had a plan. I'd had a run of nice responses from the community, and things seemed to be going well. I lost the first time, but I came back and won and was elected to the legislature. And I wanted to get a job with a law firm. I didn't want to set up one by myself, but I couldn't get a job.
What did you do?
Well, I set up a practice of my own and really didn't make any money.
It really sounds a little hard to believe that as successful as you were, you were successful in keeping your position.
Which position are you talking?
As a state representative.
Yeah, up until I decided to retire after in '86 was the year
So about 10 years.
12.
12 years in the legislature.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you have your PhD, you have your JD, and you have hung out your shingle
Correct.
by yourself. What type of cases did you find coming your way, or opportunities?
Didn't really find many. It was kind of interesting because, I was top 10 in my class of law school. And, you know, I had these other credentials, and I was well-known and everything, but nobody wanted to hire me because they were afraid that, I think, that I would get them mixed up in politics in a way they didn't want to be. In fact, you know, I remember being interviewed by Lamar Alexander in their firm, and he almost said that. He said that, and we don't want to work you as hard as we have to work our associates. We don't feel like we can treat you the way we treat the others. That was a memorable interview.
I would think so. As a consequence, you began to build your own practice?
No, I spent more time on the legislature. I built that. Okay.
And
really,
what areas did you focus in the legislature?
Whatever came up. You don't usually choose subjects that you want to concentrate on. It's not a seminar. Things happen, problems arise in the community and in the legislature, and becoming a prominent member of the legislature. It sounds like I'm pontificating or stuffy, but I was Secretary of the Finance Ways and Means Committee, which was the most powerful committee after the full. Well, let's put it this way: I'd rather be Secretary of the Finance Ways and Means Committee in the House than almost any other job, because you're controlling the budget.
Correct. And that is a very educational process, learning how the government allocates the money.
And being able to influence that.
Correct. And the Vietnam War has come to an end by this time, so it's not an anti-war political environment.
Right. It has nothing to do with the war.
But we had Carter in the White House.
Yep.
And it seems that there was a shortage of gas, and prices for gas were going through the roof, and he was telling us to turn our thermostats down and wear sweaters.
Sweaters, yeah. I was okay with sweaters.
Do you recall what other committees you might have served on, in addition to being the Secretary
of Finance, Ways and Means. In the last 6 years, I was a member of the Education Committee for my entire 12-year summons. I was in one other committee for one term, but Education and Finance were pretty much it. I mean, they were my specialties.
And what made you decide to leave the legislature? Sounds as though you were in two very important positions.
Well, I'd been doing it for 12 years, and I'd hoped to be able to run for Congress, and that became a possibility there.
So, did you run for Congress?
Yes.
And
I did not win.
You did not win. Who did win?
Bob Clement, I believe.
And at that point, you now are out of the legislature, you have your private practice. What did you decide to do?
Well, I came out, and now that I wasn't in politics so heavily, I had no problem getting job interviews. Because I had good credentials and all that.
And good relationships.
And good relationships, yes.
With elected officials.
With elected officials and appointed officials.
And at that time, do you recall who was governor?
Yeah, Winfield Dunn was still governor the last few months. In the first few months of my tenure as a legislator, he was governor, and actually lived in my district. I was his representative. We enjoyed discussing that.
That was when you left the legislature?
No.
Or when you first went in?
Yes.
Who was the governor when you left?
Well, Ray Blanton had been there. Lamar Alexander had been there. That's a crazy question. I should know that
I
instantly.
think Lamar was probably.
I think he still was.
Right, so you now were more palatable to the law firms because
And it wasn't bringing problems.
you're not bringing problems, you're actually bringing solutions. So where did you go?
Waller?
Waller, Lansden, Dortch, and Davis?
Yes.
And what was the area that you focused on when you went with them?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I really didn't focus as much as I should have, I'm sure. I did what I was interested in, and when cases came in that were something that within my range of ability to do things, I did a lot of different things.
Can you tell me a few of them?
Well, I mean,
Did you focus on education at all?
no.
That didn't come your way.
No, it doesn't come anybody's way in a firm like Waller unless you have a special situation.
Did they bring you matters that might be pending before the legislature to see if you could help on the Hill with any
Not
of
really.
the clients?
Not really.
Okay.
They were most confident and they could easily handle getting the business they needed. So there was never anything, and they were all honest, good people.
And so at Waller, did you do real estate? Did you do
I did a little real estate.
commercial transactions?
Did a little bit of that.
Did you do any litigation?
Yes, did a fair amount of litigation. I'd been promised basically to be able to work with Lou Connor in litigation, and I did a bunch at first, but it sort of drifted away. He drifted away, I drifted away.
How would you describe working with Lou in a lawsuit?
Oh, he's great. I'm a big Lou Connor fan.
He's a whirlwind.
Yeah, he's a whirlwind, and as long as you can just sit back and watch it and make additions as you can, you help, and he's just a special character.
And then the whirlwind kind of whirls off and you continue on.
I didn't continue to do construction litigation, which was what he was doing a lot of.
Okay.
I did some of that with him, but I didn't do it for very long. I've forgotten what lured me away. I don't know. If I pretty much did a little of everything. I didn't do bankruptcy.
Did you try cases in state and federal court?
Never did in federal court.
Just state court?
Just state court. Yeah.
And was it primarily in Davidson County, or did you cover some of the surrounding counties?
Both. I'd always been interested in matrimonial law. And so that was one of my big specialties, if you will. Because, I mean, I'd been doing it even before I went to Waller. I probably should have stopped at that point and not done that. I know there was some discussion about whether Waller ought to be doing it, and some of the people in the firm said, no, we're not a divorce law firm. Others said, yeah, that's right, but what happens if the chief executive officer of one of our biggest clients is sued for divorce by his wife? Would you just recommend that we sit back and hope nothing bad happens and we don't lose the client? And so there was that
Tension.
Yes.
Now, you said you were there for 12 years, so it's about 1982?
86.
86. In 1986, you go to Waller, and were you still involved in politics even though you no longer held office?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not as much.
Had the study that you did for your PhD, borne fruit as far as additional engagements for people who were seeing the correlation between moneyed interest and voting records. Did that develop at all?
No, after I left TSU, basically I was out of sociology heading for the law. And so, yes, there is one thing. There are all sorts of journals, where you publish things. There were at least then 2 top journals. I actually published while I was a member of the General Assembly and a law student. I published an article in the best journal in the field.
That's pretty good.
Keeps me busy.
Did you ever teach at Vanderbilt
Gave guest lectures only.
when you were asked to?
Yeah.
While you were working in the legislature, did you become at all involved in the Bar Association?
Yeah.
Was
Right
that
away.
right as soon as you got out of law school?
It's part of what you do.
Both the Nashville Bar and the Tennessee Bar?
Yep. And the American Bar.
And what volunteer work did you do for them?
Didn't do so much volunteer work. Obviously, the Nashville Bar Association was one where I did a lot more than I did. No work at the American Bar Association. I did get involved with the state. I wasn't doing work so much as I was reading the magazine, keeping up with the field.
Did you serve on any committees for either the Tennessee Bar or the Nashville Bar?
Well, I certainly did at the Nashville Bar.
You're pretty active, actually.
Yeah, very active.
Mhm.
And a president of the bar.
That's what I thought. You were on a number of committees and then became an officer and then became the president, if I remember
Right.
correctly. And what did you observe about the way in which the Nashville Bar changed from the time that you became a lawyer and then 10, 12, 16 years out later you become president? How had the bar changed, in your opinion?
Wasn't that far. 86 was when I got
Out of the legislature.
and started my legal practice. 86, and it was only a few years. I've forgotten exactly how many. It's only a few years for that. Anyway, I'm sorry.
And the question really was, you are dealing with lawyers from the time you get out of law school. You start dealing with them and seeing how they work right at the beginning because you're in politics.
Right.
That's what politics is about, is making laws. So you're seeing...
I remember the first time Senator Douglas Henry was my senator. And we were, by the way, that's an interesting thing. We're probably one of the few situations in the United States where both the senator in the district and the House member in the district both spoke French. Senator Henry spoke French. I spoke French.
Now, how did you end up becoming fluent in French?
Stubborn. I flunked the course, and every night I'd read 10 pages in a novel or something else like that. Keep working on it. And then when we started doing the trips to France with the Bar Association, setting up a relationship, then I had to, I did a lot of work there, and it paid off in terms of fluid nature of my French. And then it was, yeah.
You started a program through the Nashville Bar Association and also sister cities to have an exchange in France.
Right.
That was probably mid-'80s.
Yes.
And your efforts to learn to speak French were still ongoing,
Still ongoing today.
but you became fluent in French.
Well, I wouldn't say fluent. Many people would call it fluent, but it was. I became very proficient.
Very
I could
proficient.
give speeches in French.
And do translations at seminars on the law.
Yeah.
But that was a program that you really helped guide for almost 35 years. I mean, it's
Yeah.
your creation, and it's a big achievement for the Nashville Bar.
I'm pleased to say it's still going, even though I'm no longer doing that sort of thing. And that, I mean, there aren't very many bar associations that sponsor international exchanges, and so I'm very proud of the Nashville Bar.
As you should be. And that is one of the accomplishments that you reached through your volunteer work with the Nashville Bar Association, but you also became president.
Right.
And at the time that you were president, what were some of the concerns or issues that the bar was focused on at that time?
Trying to think if there's anything special. I don't recall. It may come to me, but I don't recall anything special. I mean, you have to run an operation, make sure you've got the finances that you need. Make sure that somebody doesn't think of some crazy stunt like a French exchange. You got to keep that down to a minimum.
So how many lawyers do you think joined the Nashville Bar Association in the 80s? Do you think that they had membership of 500 or 800? How many
I
lawyers?
think it was either 1,000 or 2,000. I don't remember which. When I was president, we just flipped over and gone to the larger number.
And there had been a significant increase in the number of women practicing law.
Yes.
And we had a bar association for the black lawyers, and they were also members of the Nashville Bar Association. There weren't any major upheavals in the organization. How would you describe the way in which the Nashville Bar operated and its overall ability to serve its membership?
I thought it did an excellent job.
And who was the executive director when you were there?
Alan Ramser.
Okay. And you said it was an excellent?
Excellent, yes.
Why do you say that?
Because that's the way it was. I mean, he was very hardworking, very vigorous. He could drive you nuts, absolutely nuts, but he was usually going in the right direction, and usually got to where he wanted to go. I mean, watching him work with that Black Bar Association. I mean, I think right now the idea of having young lawyers come out and go into a Black Bar Association as opposed to the Bar Association, which serves everybody, today seems a little strange, although we come back to it sometimes.
Right. When you were in the legislature, did you find that there were people like Doug Henry who helped you along the way? Were there any figures that stand out in your mind of other legislators that helped you learn how to do a better job?
It's not so much learning how to do a better job. That's fairly straightforward. It's giving you the permission to do it. I mean, basically leaving you alone to do it. And I was putting bills in the very first year I was in there. The right turn on red that we have, I was one of the main prime sponsors of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was well worth it.
Did you find it easy to work with your colleagues, or did you find resistance from people who were afraid somebody might get the limelight or get the credit?
Oh, people just went out and took whatever limelight they wanted and they could get. There was obviously some people were better liked than others. We had some really pains in the neck, as you have in any group.
Who was the speaker when you were in the legislature?
Ed Ray McWhirter, the entire time I was in the legislature.
And your relationship with him was what?
Excellent, although I was, to him, I think I was a strange creature.
Why so?
Well, the stuff that we've been talking about, the various weird deviations in my career here and there. And, I was, for the Tennessee legislature, I was fairly liberal. I think it would be fair to say that. And I really liked the people from rural West Tennessee, but I wasn't from rural West Tennessee. It was a whole different mindset.
Who were some of the legislators from rural West Tennessee?
No, I don't want to get any names.
Most of them are past, so I don't think it would hurt their feelings anymore.
I mean, people like Frank Lashley are just not. I'm sure he was a fine, decent person, but he was not fun to be around. McWhirter was. I learned. You asked the question about learning from situations. I learned more from Ned McWhirter just watching him do his job. Speaker. Superb. The best I've ever seen.
What do you recall that he did that impressed you?
He knew how to totally control the General Assembly without pushing anybody's face, without getting in anybody's face and having to be, if something was going wrong, he'd somehow get it done. The wrong thing would disappear. He'd do it by getting some of his rural West Tennessee buddies to do it, or if it was something that I needed, he'd try to make it possible for me to get all or most of what I wanted. And it was just smooth.
How did he get along with Lieutenant Governor Wilder?
Just fine. I liked him. He liked me, I think. He was a very strange fellow. Very strange. Very unusual. McWhirter was just the opposite. He was a good old boy.
Down to earth.
Sort of at first. He became much more sophisticated when he was. I mean, he was hanging around with Jimmy Carter and other presidential candidates and things like that. I mean, he was a national player.
And did you, during the time that you were in the legislature, have much relationship with the Nashville mayor?
Yeah, fought him bitterly for a while.
Which one?
Beverly Briley.
That was right in the beginning.
Yeah, he was the one that was opposing us because, the McCarthy people wanted to have some delegates. And he basically said it, he and one other person, the governor, I guess, was the one who really said this, but this is what they both meant. They said, we worked awfully hard to get it the way we like it right now. We don't want to change.
So that was during the McCarthy campaign.
Yeah.
Then you get into law school, you become elected almost right away.
Right.
And then the mayor changes, and it becomes Bill Boner.
Yeah.
How did you get along with him?
Took him to France.
Did he speak French?
No.
Did he behave himself?
He did indeed. I still remember he and Tracy.
This is the third Mrs. Boner?
I can't keep up.
Okay.
Maybe I think it was 5 actually, but whatever. I can remember over in Cobb, Boner was there with our whole delegation, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and they were having a party in our honor. And Tracy actually sang some of her country songs, and then he made a speech or something like that. But it was an amazing experience. In fact, I remember we walked into the mayor's office out there. The mayor was also a member of the French Senate, so it's a, pretty good group. So we walked into his office to talk, and I'm sitting here. Remember, I had run against him just recently.
Ah, yes.
I ran against him.
For the congressional seat.
Exactly. And I looked over at Bill. He was sitting here, and we're in the mayor's office, and I looked over at Boner. I said, "Do you ever expect me to be the one speaking for you?" What do you think about that, huh?
Did he say anything?
No.
So, usually, the legislators from Davidson County carry some of the water for the mayor.
Oh, absolutely.
And after Boner came Bredesen.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And did you have a good working relationship with him?
Yes, not a warm, terribly friendly. We got along just fine, and I think we were cordial to each other. There's absolutely nothing bad about it at all.
But he went to that other university
Yes.
down the street from Harvard.
Right.
Did that have anything to do with why it was just cordial?
No.
Okay.
That's
Just the personalities.
that was. It wasn't a personality. He was just doing his thing, and I was doing my thing. And where things needed to be done together, we did them together.
Were you still in office when Purcell came in?
No. And then I was a tour guide.
All right. So now let's go back to your participation in the bar. After you set up this program that was remarkable and served as president, did you continue being on committees and being involved in the Bar Association?
Yeah.
I know that you continued a lot of keeping the exchange program viable. Did you spend any time in France other than the week trips that you would take?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I did. But remember, the biggest way that I contributed to the Bar Association was not this Bar Association, but was the Tennessee Bar. I was the Tennessee Bar Association's lobbyist for 20 years.
And tell me about that. How did that come about?
For some reason, there was a disagreement on style, I think, as much as anything else, between the prior lobbyist,
Who was?
John Lyle.
Oh, yes.
He's a good lobbyist. He was a very good lobbyist. And they came to me and said, "Would you like to be our lobbyist?" Because, I'm a ex-legislator with all the stuff that we talked about. And I said, "Well, I don't want to step on John's toes. If he's leaving, yes, I'd be very interested, but I'm not interested in having a fight with John Lyle. He's a friend of mine." And they said that would be worked out, and it was. And I did 20 years.
And during that time, you would take the concerns of the Tennessee Bar Association on pending legislation and have input?
Yes.
And that was primarily what they needed you to do as far as the shaping of the laws. And did you have any observations in those 20 years of how the General Assembly and the people you were talking to, the personalities and getting legislation passed, did you have any sense that it was changing? Because under McWhorter and Wilder, it was basically a Democratic-controlled institution.
We had a supermajority one year.
And what did you observe?
I observed it's better to be on the winning side than on the losing side.
Well said.
You can quote me on that.
What else happened?
Well, Corder and I left the legislature together. He went to the governor's office. I went to Waller. And and with all that implies is probably the best thing to say about it, you know.
And then at some point, you became the lobbyist for the TBA.
Yeah,
So
that
you're
was
back
several years later.
You come back on the Hill.
Yeah.
And
Well, you know, yes, yeah.
and so some of the individuals that you served with were still there, but some had changed.
Oh, yes.
Some had changed.
Huge number. There's only one left, Randy McNally, that I served with.
And what is your relationship with the Lieutenant Governor, Randy McNally, now?
Yeah, we get along fine. I just don't have much cause.
You don't need to go up there, but while
Yeah.
you were in the legislature, you had a good relationship with him.
Just to find nothing special, nothing. Yeah, a good one. If I wanted something, I'd go ask him. If he wanted something, he could ask me. You know, we acted as fellow legislators.
And did you notice that there was a change in the makeup of the legislature, that there weren't as many lawyers
No.
in the legislature?
I'm not saying it isn't true, but no, I didn't notice that.
What did you observe about having, I don't want to use the word influence, but I do. What did you notice about the influence that you had on the individual legislators over those 20 years?
Well, I was a lawyer, and I was a paid lobbyist. And those two, the legislators are very comfortable with. You know, they understand that we are to be worked with just like any citizen that has the time and the money to get up there and spend their time with the legislature. I don't know what else I can say. I know this, that it was clear to me that lawyers had a real advantage. Even if people say they don't like lawyers up there, they do. Because the lawyers are the ones that write the bills, and the lawyers are the ones that can explain what something means. And if you can trust a particular lawyer, that gives him, that particular lawyer, him or her, a real advantage. And if they use it properly, it's for everybody.
And so drafting legislation is an art unto itself.
Yeah.
And as someone has said, the devil is in the details.
Absolutely.
And that's where many lobbyists, I think, earn their money.
Yep.
You have to read what's happening, and with the Bar Association, they have a very vested interest in seeing that good laws are passed, not ones that are written poorly.
Oh, yeah, we have. Oh, I mean, we come out with bills at the Bar Association special committees. Each of the committees are coming up with bills, and we screen them, Alan Ramser and I, and the Bar Association, particularly the president, would screen them. And if we thought it was a good idea, we'd have the bill drafted. We'd write it, have the bill drafted, get it to a sponsor, and then make sure the sponsor passes it. And, you know, that system works very well, particularly in a situation like the Tennessee General Assembly or Metro Council, where there isn't a lot of money to pay for staff and everything.
After 20 years, what was the reason that you just stepped aside?
Well, everything was changing in the legislature, and I had been doing it for 20 years.
What year did you leave as the lobbyist for the TBA?
A couple or 3 years ago.
Oh, just within like 2016, 2017?
Yes, maybe even a little later.
Okay.
I left at the end of the legislative session. I'm not kept up the way I guess I should.
Was Alan still the executive director?
He was for a period.
And then there was a new executive director,
Then there was a new,
Jocelyn
Yeah.
Stevenson, and you worked with her?
no, we did, by the time I was ready to leave, they were ready to stop doing, many bar associations, I'd say even most, don't like to do lobbying and that kind of stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they basically phased that portion of their activities?
I don't know how much I should find out more about how much they're doing, but I don't think it's as much as we did.
Before?
Yeah,
So it's maybe tampered down a bit.
I think so.
Well, as you look back, you've mentioned Lou Connor, you've mentioned Doug Henry. What lawyers did you meet throughout your career that you would say are the top 3 or 4 who made a big impression on you or contributed in a significant way to the person that you are?
I'm not sure. That's a tough question. I've met a whole lot of people.
Any at the Waller firm?
Oh, yeah. As lawyers.
Right.
They were not lobbying.
No, not as lobbyists. I didn't mean as lobbyists, just lawyers.
Oh, yeah, they're first rate. All of them at Waller are first rate.
Who comes to mind when I ask you that question, that's first rate? Who would you say are the top ones?
Philip Davidson was a manager. He didn't exactly practice law by the time I got to deal with him, but he was pretty slick. And Lou, of course. I mean, just lawyer after lawyer. I mean, 50 or 100 lawyers. You give me a list, and I'll point out a story about them for you.
During the time that you have been the lobbyist and active in the Bar Association and practicing law, did you continue your involvement in elective politics for other candidates?
Some, but not as much as you might think.
And you and Nancy, while you have a residence here in Nashville, now you have no children, is that right?
No children.
Nancy also has a degree in sociology?
Yep.
You have another residence, and that's in Florida.
Just for the last couple of 3 years.
Okay.
I mean, we own the property for longer, but we've been spending substantial time down there only the last 3 or 4 years.
She got a teaching job down there, though.
Yes.
Is that right? So you have this.
She doesn't now.
Not now, but during the time that you're practicing law. Excuse me. Practicing law and working as a lobbyist, you have a commuter marriage. You all go back and forth together. Is that right?
Yeah. You know, the snowbird is what they're called.
Snowbirding, that's what it is. Yes. Have you had any role in judicial elections? Did you ever get involved in those?
They really don't have campaigns to speak of.
No.
There may be exceptions, but by and large, their idea is announce it, have a picture taken, and have the judge remind everybody that there's an election this year, so, you know, pay attention, stay awake and pay attention. There are exceptions, of course, your husband being one.
Thank you. Let me ask about the lessons that you've learned and the advice that you have for new lawyers. What would you say are the qualities that make for an outstanding lawyer? You've been through making laws, litigating, working in commercial law where you don't even go to court. You've been involved in the Bar Association. You've had a wide range of experiences. So this new lawyer that comes in, what would you tell that individual are the qualities that they should emulate?
Well, one thing that is sort of one of these things you learn and look back on, and I think you've asked me a number of these questions where I haven't been able to, but I can do this one. If I had to do it all over again, I would concentrate on one or two specialties a whole lot more than I did. Something would come up of an interest, and I would plunge into it. And the people at Waller just looked, bless their hearts, they just looked at me and shook their heads. But, if he wants to do it, let him do it, But I would say concentrate and specialize more than I did.
And as far as qualities, you've mentioned several. As you've said, the people at Waller were very fine people. What made that evident to you? What were the fine qualities that they had?
Personal interactions is how you would find out. It was a big law firm with lots of potential for problems, and they avoided the problems. It was extremely well managed.
Now that's something that you've mentioned twice. Once you used the word avoiding, and then you used with McWhorter smooth, and it sounds as though confrontation isn't something that you encourage.
Confrontation? No, I guess I wouldn't particularly. If you're in a law firm, you need to get along with the other lawyers in the firm because you'll need their help.
But what about your adversaries?
Well, adversaries you have to treat with decency and same way. Actually, in one sense, we have
be respectful.
We have professional duties to be appropriate to handle the opposite party just as well as you'd handle somebody who you didn't have any relationship with. You're supposed to be nice to people, and they are a good firm.
Would you characterize the practice of law as an honorable profession?
If done the way it should be, yes.
And how would you describe the lawyers in the Nashville Bar Association for the most part?
My experience has been very good.
Good. At this point, you have said that you've left full-time lobbying. Are you retired at this point?
Yes.
What are your current activities?
Watching the TV to see who's going to be doing what in Washington, D.C. is a biggie. I still run, try to jog every day or every other day.
Now, I should say, for purposes of our interview, we've just been through a hellacious year of COVID, where we were all pretty much isolated and wearing masks.
Yeah.
And it's only within the last 2 or 3 months where we actually can be around other people who have been vaccinated.
Well, that affected me too, obviously.
Right. And how did it affect you?
Well, rather than, I haven't been into an Alliance Française, French Alliance meeting in 1 or 2 years. It's something I committed a lot of time to over the years, and you would expect that I would be continuing, but I'm not because of that.
Now, the Alliance Française is totally different than the Sister Cities program.
Yes.
And what is it?
It does the same thing. It promotes the development of French relations with other countries, not just the United States, and it also is devoted to promoting the French language, and it's just it's a group of people who are interested in things French.
And when I asked you about current activities, I also meant to include those that you do as pastimes, and I have a feeling that gardening is a pastime of yours. Is that true?
It has been in the past a lot. If you drive by our house, you see the
Azaleas.
azaleas and all that out there.
And
It's past the peak, but it's still pretty.
you have a green thumb, according to Nancy.
Well, my thumb's retired too.
What projects are there out there that you would like to accomplish that you haven't yet done?
I'm not sure.
Will you be writing anything?
No,
Okay.
I have no interest in that particularly.
So what is your type of retirement?
Relaxation. I'm still in the post-retirement period, and so I can be very comfortable watching what's happening up in Washington.
Do you ever reach out to your representative or your senator, or
I have many times, but I haven't recently.
are you still reading a lot?
Yes, but not as much as I used to.
And what types of literature or books do you find favorites?
The thing science news, newsletter of science, Scientific American, those would be my favorites.
As a kind of a wrap-up to our interview today, I want to say, is there anything else you wish I had asked and that you would like to tell the audience?
No, I think I owe you more answers than you owe me further questions.
We try to make it an even swap. But I do want to say thank you very much. I have found this very interesting, and I hope we've covered everything that you've done, but I have a feeling that there are a number of experiences that you've had that you will recall, and I'm going to be somewhat sad that I didn't ask you about them. As you said, I could go through the list of Waller lawyers, and I bet you could tell me a story about each one of them.
The ones that were there when I was there, yes.
Right. And I hate to think that I've missed out on some of those good stories. But likewise, I think there are stories about some of your colleagues in the legislature that you were very politic and didn't tell me. Because you've probably seen things of behavior that may or may not have been acceptable, or may have been highly acceptable.
Or it may have been better than you expect.
That's right,
better.
better.
I would expect it's better than you expect.
And I'm glad to hear that. I am.
And that it was. I make no comment
Not on,
about the last
you can
5
only
years.
You can only make comments about what you observed and what you experienced.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.